I'm Kenny Coleman, a Senior Technical Marketing Manager at VMware, focused on the Tanzu Kubernetes Grid Service for vSphere. In this demonstration, we'll be looking at scaling up and out a Tanzu Kubernetes Grid cluster using a custom specification. In this environment, a vSphere namespace has already been created, as well as a Tanzu Kubernetes Grid cluster called TKG Demo Cluster 01. Looking inside the Workload Management menu, we can see a list of the Tanzu Kubernetes clusters and a running list of all the virtual machines associated as well. Take note of the VM class, as we will change those for this cluster. The kubectl and kubectl vSphere binaries have been installed and configured for use on my system. Using the kubectl vSphere command, we are going to authenticate using vSphere SSO to the supervisor cluster. After authenticating, the following contexts are available. Setting kubectl to use the context of the demo TKG namespace allows us to view all of the Tanzu Kubernetes clusters using the kubectl command line. The Tanzu Kubernetes cluster has already been deployed using a custom specification. We can change this file and apply it to use the declarative and desired state nature of Kubernetes. For this demonstration, we're going to scale out the control plane from 1 to 3 nodes. We will also scale in the workers from 2 to 3 nodes. And lastly, we're going to scale up the worker nodes using an extra small VM to a small virtual machine size that increases the virtual CPU and RAM. However, this will be done in a rolling fashion that I'll explain here shortly. Next, we apply the configuration to the supervisor cluster and let the cluster API and declarative nature do its job. You'll notice first that the control plane virtual machines are created. These will be the first components to be added to the cluster. To show how the cluster is reacting, I'm going to log in, specifying the Tanzu Kubernetes cluster namespace and the cluster itself. This gives me the context to switch to the cluster and interact with it directly. This is where I can use any standard Kubernetes command against it. So to keep an eye on things, let's go ahead and put a watch on the cluster nodes. The first thing that we notice is that the third worker has already been removed from the cluster, but the virtual machine itself has not been deleted from vSphere. This is a part of the process and is expected. Next, we can see that the second control plane node has been added to the cluster and it required a new leader election. Now, our first worker is going through the reconciliation process. This process will create a new node with the best effort small virtual machine class. This process of a rolling upgrade will be to flush the containers of the node that is being decommissioned, taint the node so that no new workloads can be deployed to it, and then Kubernetes deployments will reconcile the pods and have them run on the new node that is joined to the cluster, which does not have the taint. After that node is done being removed and has been completely flushed, it can now be removed from the cluster. The next worker node will go through the same process in a serial fashion to make sure there is always an appropriate amount of nodes and resources available. Back on the vCenter UI, we can see that the final worker node with size extra small has been deleted from inventory, and all of the virtual machines are now at our desired end state. Using the kubectl command line, we can set our context to the TKG demo namespace, and we can fetch a list of all the Tanzu Kubernetes clusters, and it shows us that we have now achieved our desired end state as well. Thanks for watching this video on scaling a Tanzu Kubernetes Grid cluster using the Tanzu Kubernetes Grid Service for vSphere. Get more information about the Tanzu Kubernetes Grid Service in the official documentation.